All right, hello everyone. So I heard about Droidcon Montreal, and I saw everyone last year tweeting from Droidcon NYC, and I thought, man, that was a really cool event. I want to make sure I do one this year. So they put out the proposal call, and I submitted one, and just made it all up. I'm like, I built this app in Kotlin, and like it was awesome. Um, and I didn't really think that I would get accepted. I've never spoken at a conference before or anything. But they accepted me. So I was like, oh man, I got to find a client that'll let me build their app in Kotlin. so I built this app for this Christian ministry in Minnesota before called Desiring God, and somehow I talked him into letting me build this app. But I did it, and so I'm not lying today. I did actually build an app in Kotlin, and they did pay me. So my name is Matt Wear. I come from Austin, Texas. I work at a company called WellMatch. We're trying to fix healthcare in America, which is pretty hard to do. So um, I am not the best developer in the world. So I heard I've heard this saying once and I liked it. I don't know. It's probably some stupid Facebook inspirational thing, but like, don't let what you're not good at stop you from what you are good at or could be good at. Um, so if you see mistakes up here, let me know, and we'll talk through them. And if I say something wrong, call me out in front of everyone. So, but yeah, but I am awesome at Photoshop, so don't even say anything about that. Does anyone know who the person on the right is? DHH, yeah. So these guys kind of know all the things, it seems like. I always wanted to use this animation. They always do that at Apple events. It's so dumb. Um, so Kotlin, or Kotlin. I have no idea which way is the right way to say it. So I'm just going to say Kotlin because that's what I've been saying. And if that is wrong, then we'll just have a big GIF type debate in 10 years when it's really popular. Kotlin is a JVM language. It's statically typed. You can also build JavaScript apps in it, although I have not built anything in JavaScript with it, so I can't answer any questions there. It's got a lot of great language features, like data classes and extension methods. It's concise syntax, null safety, all kinds of great stuff we're going to talk about today. So if you don't know what those are, no big deal. We'll get to them. First slide. No, not yet. So it's open source. You go and submit a pull request if you want to make a change, or you can download the releases from here. And I highly recommend it. They have a Gradle plugin there also, and their Android Studio plugin and IntelliJ plugin through the IDE. So it's built by JetBrains, the people that make our IntelliJ and Android Studio. So just right off the bat, hello world. Just print line, hello world here. One cool thing about Kotlin right away, you don't need semicolons. You can use them if you want, and you might make a mistake and accidentally put one in. So here is a variable assignment. So declare I here, it's an int. I assign it 0, and then I print it out, and it would print 0. If I assign it null, it won't let me. This is one of the best features of Kotlin. We'll go into this a little bit deeper. But if I put a little question mark at the end of my type, it is now a nullable type, and you can assign it to null. You cannot, so val is actually kind of like a final. It's immutable, so you can't reassign here, but you can use var, and then it will let you, it's an immutable type, or mutable type. So I don't have the cool animations that I saw this morning. Man, those presentations were amazing. So anyways, so var, and then I do that here. A function. So functions are fun. Here's a function max. It takes two integers, decides which one is bigger, and returns A if it's bigger, and if not, it returns B. So you can also just make them expressions if you want. This is part of the conciseness of Kotlin, or Kotlin. So this is a fully functional function right here. For loops. So here's a for loop. Pretty self-explanatory. Just arg and args, goes through all the integers and prints out what the max is. So one really cool thing that I like about Kotlin, one of my favorite features, is the when statement. It's kind of like a switch statement, so you don't just have to switch on integers. It can be any type here. So I am doing integers here. In each case, you just give it a little arrow symbol and the anonymous kind of function type there, and you can execute code. You can combine cases just with a comma there. You can even call functions for your cases. And if you just have a bunch of if statements together, kind of like maybe if you have a code smell in your onClick method or something. Oh, so here's another one. You can do like a in statement, it has an in statement. So this is like an on progress change, like a seek bar. So if this seek is between 0 and 20, do this. 21 and 40, do this. So, and you can also just, you don't even have to have something to compare against. You can just have a bunch of conditionals right in a row with your when statement. Just kind of have that more concise syntax. Classes. This is a valid user class right here. Just that 2 keywords. And as you can see, I'm instantiating the user. You don't need the new keyword. You just call the constructor with parentheses, and that will just print out the memory address of that user right there. But say you needed a constructor, you can just give it a constructor like this. This is a full class. It'll automatically give it 2 properties, first name and last name, a string, and I can create a user. Here's Nolan Ryan, and I can print out his memory address. And here is, so your primary constructor, you can have primary and secondary constructors in Kotlin. And so your primary constructor, if it does need some initialization code, you just put init. Init was new in M11. Before it was just an anonymous function block, and then you can put init code there if you wanted to. Same with here, but these are 2 immutable values coming in, and you can init them with a function, say hi. You can see we're kind of building more complex code here. Inheritance. So all classes in Kotlin are final, so you can't inherit from them unless they're explicitly marked open. And this is apparently effective Java, so they reference this a lot in the documentation on Kotlin's site. Kotlin has excellent documentation. If you need to know anything, just go to kotlinlang.org and you can see their documentation there, and it's excellent. So you can't inherit, you can't just override methods from classes or extend a class, because they're all final by default. Static code. So there is no static code specifically on your class, but you can have these things called companion objects, and you just define them. Say you had a country code on your company. So you can't have static code. You can't have a static instant variable on your class. You have these companion objects, and but you get a similar syntax like you would in Java. So no like private, static, final, whatever at the top of your class. You'd have this. A common way in Android that we have these is like a static method to get like an instance of your fragment. So you would have to put that in the companion object if you wanted to to have that pattern that's pretty common in Android. So right here is a companion object that lets you get a new instance of devotional fragment. And so so more classes here. So there are no fields in Kotlin. So these are all properties here. We have a name, street, city, state, zip. State is mutable. The rest are immutable. I mean, they're all mutable. State is nullable. You can define your getters and setters right under that if you need to do something custom in your getter or setter. You don't have to define both. You could just define a setter. You could just define a getter. But just removes hundreds of lines from your classes. So I did lie a little bit. There is such thing as a field if you use this $ syntax, which they just announced yesterday or maybe the day before that they're going to deprecate in M12. So they're not sure what they're going to use, but you're still going to be able to access your fields if you really want to. But in M11, you do it with a $. Great. So here is a retrofit trait. And I think what I'm showing here is extension methods. So no, I'm not. Oh yeah, trait. So a trait is like an interface. And you say trait, although in M12 they're actually going to just name it interface. They said they didn't like the name trait. And the only difference between an interface in Kotlin and an interface in Java, or a trait in Kotlin, which is what it's called in M11, is you can put methods in your interface. So if you ever needed to put a method, like say you wanted to version your, I was just trying to think of some kind of example. I couldn't think of one where I would want a method in my interface, but say you wanted to like version your retrofit service interface, then you could just put a method in there and it would return what version it was. You can't do that in Java. Enum classes. These are some of my favorite. So this is kind of like your normal enum in Java. You know, you just have the for, and the ordinal value just be the integer. You can also call it a constructor on each one. So you call a little bit of code. They actually cleaned up this syntax a little bit for M12, where you could just say red, open parentheses, and then the name of the RGB value. You can also do cool things like, maybe this isn't cool, maybe this is bad, but in my app I have 3 themes, a dark theme, a light theme, and a sepia theme. It's like a reading app. And so I have this enum to know like what to set things, and I have this, you can put an abstract function on your enum class. So it's get color from resources. So I could say like dark theme dot get color from resource, pass into context, and it would give me what color it was. Probably a better way to solve that, but just want to give you an idea of what you can do in these enum classes, which I think are pretty cool. So extension methods. So I'm sure everyone here has a util class, even if you don't call it util. You probably have one, unfortunately, because and I bet some of those methods like probably should exist on a thing like string or something. Even Android has text utils. Is empty because string.isEmpty is not available for lower API levels. So say I wanted to add a isPalindrome to string. I can actually do that in Kotlin. This is kind of like C# extension functions, if anyone's ever used those. Except if I remember from C#, right, I used to do that a long time ago. I don't like to admit that publicly, but I just did. It's more obvious where you're importing this static function from. So you don't want to overdo them because obviously you can't mock this code and whatnot. But but you can just define function string dot is palindrome anywhere in your code, and then wherever you have a string, you can just say dot is palindrome and it'll return if it is the same forward as backwards. Yeah. it is scoped to wherever you imported it from. So yeah, it's scoped to where you're using it right there, but it won't be, you know, if I just define this in my code, then my brother who's programming wouldn't have it, obviously. So it's not in string everywhere. But another cool thing is data classes. So if, you know, we all have these classes in our apps where it's just a bunch of properties to just kind of store data. You know, you map them from like from a JSON request, and they don't do much else except store data. The data class makes it really easy to just give you a class with these properties that you can access, and it also gives you a few convenience method like toString and hash code and 2 equals and some other things. So just a really easy way to keep your code concise. So probably my favorite thing in Kotlin was the null safety. If you don't have a nullable type, you can't assign null to it. So it makes it really easy for the compiler to tell when you're accessing something that's null. But if you put this little question mark at the end, then it's a nullable type, and you can assign null. But if you call a property on that null thing, then the compiler will throw an error that you didn't check for null. So they have a, you know, you could check for null like you do in Java. If whatever equals null, then do your thing. Then it would compile. Great. But Kotlin makes it way easier, way more concise syntax. So right here is a onSave instance state. It takes the bundle and it gets the current scroll position of my scroll view, so that when you like rotate the device and you're scrolled halfway down, when it recreates that activity and puts the fragment back on, then it will know to scroll it to the right place, so the user doesn't have to scroll down every time. So out state could be null, and the compiler knows that. So it's not going to compile if you just say outstate.putInt. But if you put this little question mark there, it's the same exact thing of checking if outstate is null before executing outstate.putInt. It just does it in one line, and if outstate is null, then it won't execute what's on the right side of it. And as you see, it's got 2 properties deep there on the right. Holder, if that's null, it won't execute accessing content scroll view, and if that's null, it won't access get scroll Y. And then they have this pretty cool thing called the Elvis operator. I guess that little question mark and the colon looks like Elvis, who was a famous pop star in the 50s. So if what is null on the left and you have an Elvis operator, it will execute what's on the right. So it'll just be 0 if that happens to be null on the left. So it maybe it looks a little weird at first, but this is one of my favorite things because you know, law Demeter, I don't know how anything is termed or pronounced, but you know, you shouldn't be accessing a ton of things down that aren't immediately available to you, but you know, all of our apps do it, and we're all checking for null, and we have these null checks everywhere, and this just cleans up the code so much better. You can see exactly what the interesting part without having to do all the null checks. So here's the app I built. It's just a pretty simple app. It loads up a set of devotionals, and you can scroll through them and read them each day. You can favorite them. I did this thing with the reveal animations to change the reading settings here. It's a pretty simple app, and you can get a daily notification if you want. So this is the app that I got paid for. Awesome. And you know, just kind of normal app there. It was min SDK 9 because I hate myself. I targeted SDK 22, so 9's 2.3. I used app compat v7 with the card view, recycler view, action bar activity, the toolbar. I used RxJava. I tried RxKotlin. They said they updated it with M11. It has some nice stuff to make the syntax a little bit better, because using Rx Java with Kotlin is a little rough. Like, I'll show you in a minute, but I didn't see an update on Maven Central or even in the Git repo. Like, it showed that the repository hasn't been updated in a long time. So I actually couldn't get it to work with their Gradle plugin. So I just used Rx Java. I used Rx Android because that's what Daniel Liu said to do a few months ago when he wrote his Rx posts, and now he says it's terrible. So I probably won't be using that as much anymore, but I use their app observable to make sure it unsubscribes for me on the fragments and activities. I use the OK libraries, OKIO, HTTP URL connection, retrofit, JSON, Crashalytics. I use it for the beta and crash reporting. I used Holder. So probably a lot of people here use Butterknife, and I used to use Butterknife too. I loved it. But then I found like I had so many inject view statements all over my code, and they just got harder to manage than I needed them to be. And then I can't remember the guy's name, but he goes by Avant on GitHub. But he made Retro Lambda and some other stuff. He made this one called Holder that'll automatically generate Java classes for all of your views to make it a lot easier to access them. And I'll show you how to use that in a minute. But you can't use Butterknife with Kotlin. There is a Knife project. I didn't actually use that, but that is the big hole in Kotlin. There's no annotation processing. So you can't use like Dagger to generate code for you with annotations or Butterknife or anything like that. You could use them to generate Java, but you couldn't use them on a Kotlin class. So, and Kotlin is 100% operable with Java, so half of your app could be in Java, half could be in Kotlin, or just your test could be in Kotlin. A lot of options there. If you just want to try it out, you don't actually have to go all in with Kotlin. You could say like, okay, this one activity I'm going to build in Kotlin. So, and I'll talk a little bit about the risks there in a minute. I use ProGuard because I also hate myself, and Kotlin Android extensions. So they did actually build something in Kotlin that helps you do something like Butterknife, where it'll give you, it'll give you access to your layout that you put in your activity, but it only works with activities, and it actually doesn't work with layouts that have include files on them. It doesn't work with, I saw Levonica, I don't know his actual name, but he's been writing a blog series on Kotlin. He said that if you have two layout files with the same name, it doesn't work either. So there's just a lot of bugs with that. So like it works fine if you have an activity and you don't have an include tag on your layout file, and your layout file, you only have one named that. So you could, I did use it, but I couldn't use it for my fragments or my adapters for my recycler view or anything like that. SQLite, parsable, and the reveal animations, so, and fade-in animations for the older platforms. I'm sorry, guys. I lost my voice like 2 days ago, right before my first ever conference talk, yelling at my T-ballers. So, Holder. So you don't want to write a bunch of find view by IDs. That is super painful. So you can include their plugin here. You do have to put a little bit of a nasty hack to get it to work, because what Avant told me is that he used kind of a weird method to get those on the class path or whatnot for the other things to use. So, but if you tell it exactly like in the generated folder, here's the source for those views, then it'll be able to find it. I want to dig into that Gradle plugin and see actually what's wrong with it, so I can potentially help out, but I just haven't had time yet. So, but that's how you would use Holder if you wanted to. Yeah, so this is how it works in a fragment. So on view created, you would just this generated class here, Holder fragment devotional, the name of the fragment. it's fragment devotional fragment, and the layout file is fragment devotional. So it will generate this code at build time with that Gradle plugin, and you just pass it in the view, and it'll it'll map it to this holder instance, and then you can access all of your views on it. So there's a button called reload for if the network fails, you can try to reload. And I set a click listener on that one. So, and of course it's a nullable type, so I don't have to check if it's null with a big long if statement. I can just use these cool question marks. Pretty awesome. So the Kotlin Android extensions. I'm super impressed with their team, like the way Kotlin's going, their documentation. Like, I have had very few negative experiences with Kotlin. And I actually am really happy they're taking Android developers into consideration, like their reflection. They added an M11, they put in a different jar to avoid too many methods. And so I did use their Android extensions, and I'm working with one of their developers to get these other things worked out, but there are some problems with it, so just be a little warned there. But when it works, it's awesome. You just put this import at the top of your at the top of your activity, and then you have access to all of your views. You don't have to do anything on create. So it's great. What did I want to show here? So yeah, just another instance of holder. Here's my RxJava stuff. Apparently you're not supposed to use on error either. I learn new stuff about RxJava all the time. So like you might have issues where it doesn't get called even though when something probably should. So I'm really looking forward to the RxJava talk that Juan's doing here tomorrow. So one cool thing is you have this it keyword. If you notice in my observable, when I create the observable on the top code snippet, so it is kind of like the instance of what is passed in for this anonymous function. So just it keyword there is something interesting. And the syntax is a little dirty. I think it would be a lot cleaner if I could have gotten Rx Kotlin to work, but I couldn't. So so if you do need to access like a dot class, they have this Java class wrapper function, so you just use that to be able to say. So in Java, this would be like devotional for today, wakeful intent service dot class to be able to create that intent. But here, it's just going to wrap it in this Java class. And again, here's a trait, retrofit to be able to get what I need here. So things to think about with Kotlin. It's about 6,000 methods. I think it was like 6,300, maybe even a little bit less than that, but just less than 7,000. Android compilation is changing, so I don't think this will ever affect your app in Kotlin, like you won't be able to compile it. It just might compile a lot slower because it compiles to JVM code, and they're always going to have to support JVM code. But from what I understand, the Jack and Jill compiler are trying to skip steps when you take Java and put it to bytecode and then put it to DEX. I think they're just trying to go straight to DEX, if I understand it right. So you might, in the future, your Kotlin app might compile a lot slower than your Java app if they don't support that in their compilation stuff. There are some bytecode differences between compiled Java and compiled Kotlin. That's beyond the scope of this talk, but Jake Warden put together a really awesome document that goes way deeper than what I did here, and he compares bytecode that's generated with both. If you're not using Gradle, I think it might be harder to do Android just because Gradle's awesome, but also they don't have plugins for Maven or that I know of, so or Ant. If anyone's still doing that, I'm sorry. And it has bugs. Like you'll run into bugs every once in a while. When I was developing it, every once in a while the Gradle plugin would seem like it was going pretty slow, and I get like an out of memory error or something. So it's pretty rare though. Like like I said, I ran into very little resistance developing with Kotlin. It was awesome. I love the concise syntax more than I could communicate here. So it's super easy to learn. I think just looking at the syntax today, you could probably write something right away. There's also this pretty cool feature in Android Studio and IntelliJ that if you have the Kotlin installed, then you can convert any Java file to Kotlin, and it's pretty good. Sometimes it's like doesn't recognize the type or whatnot and produces something weird, but most of the time produces great code. So if you ever want to see like what would this class look like in Kotlin, just go to the menu and convert this class to Kotlin. So love the syntax. All classes and functions are final, so it's better Java. I mean it's just better. It's better architected. Null safety is probably the biggest feature that I liked. I didn't have to declare my code with null checks. I didn't run into problems where things were null and I didn't really expect them to be null. So, and even though there are some bugs, their team is very responsive. If you tweeted, "I hate Kotlin because of this," and then tagged Kotlin Lang, they'll actually respond to you and help you out and figure out what's going on. Although it'll probably be like 12 hours later because most of them are in Russia. So, yeah, if you have any questions, I'm Parallel Cross on Twitter, and here's my email address. And I don't know how long I went, so that seemed to go really fast. It went a little bit longer at the GDG. So, what time is it now? Okay. Okay, cool. So, thanks. Has anyone tried this before, Kotlin before, or no? No one? Have you written anything in it, or no one? All right, awesome, cool. Who's JetBrains? So, like the actual individuals? Okay. Yes. Pretty often. I don't know, every couple months, I guess, maybe. So. Yes. The concise syntax. I mean, just you don't have these giant classes of getters and setters and whatnot. So. Yeah, probably the concise syntax, and I don't know. The extension methods are great. Just a lot of modern features, lambdas, So I don't even know if I mentioned that it has lambdas, but yes, sir. What happens to a non-nullable what? Yeah. Um. Oh, you have to assign something to it. No, you don't have to assign something to it. Sorry, you just can't assign null to it. So, if you assign null to it, then it won't compile. Is all. Well, it won't compile that way either. So, but you don't have to do it in the declaration, is what I mean. So, let's see. So say I have var I and say it's an int. Well, this is a compiler here, but let's. Oh yeah. Var I int. So print. So I guess they have default values for most of the types, I think. So let's say class user and then var user. I don't know. This is weird, so that won't compile. At least I didn't think it would. So Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So, but this is also a kind of a fun thing too. You can play around with Kotlin if you just download the stuff from the GitHub page I mentioned. You can just run Kotlin C here, and I can't remember what this is called, but anyways. Yes. Oh, do you mean like what, like like IDE features and whatnot? Yeah. Yeah, I think this is just some of the stuff they're working on. So they did release this thing called Anchor too that you might be curious about, where you can build layouts in their DSL, their domain specific language. I'm not too interested in that, so I didn't bring it up here. But so yes, like actually running it on the device. No, I mean it's just the JVM, so our Dalvik VM, that's our art. So I mean basically, like if it did actually, so that's one thing we don't know about Kotlin, I guess, is in Java we've learned all these things that are kind of like small optimizations that you just kind of know from doing Java that you should do them. On like older versions of Android, you should use the field instead of the property and stuff like that. Um, so crap. So there might be things that are really slow that we just don't know about. So, but for the most part, I didn't notice any differences. My development speed was a little bit faster. Um, so, yes. No, yeah, none that I ran into. So, yes. They have it. I think they have it planned, but I mean, it's a really hard thing, and I don't even think they've started. So, but really great team. Yes. Like accessing Java from Colon. Is there a problem with that? No, not at all. So, I know a lot of like some people I think are just writing tests with it, and that's the only thing that it's used for in their development. So that's a totally valid way. Their whole app's written in Java, and they just write their tests in Kotlin. So, and I think that's a great thing that you could just try it. You don't have to invest everything into it. Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, there's still annotations. Just it won't generate like Java code or anything like that. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening.